Hey, Rob here, founder of Koyfin. We just released a big product upgrade and I wanted to walk you through the key features that we rolled out. We upgraded a lot of new things, but this video is going to focus on three key elements. The first thing is the data and navigation changes. The second thing is graphing and snapshots. And the last thing, and probably the biggest change, is an upgraded My Dashboards experience. Let me share my screen and show you what it's all about. So on the navigation, just wanted to mention a couple of things. So first of all, don't forget that you could always adjust your zoom by reducing the zoom on your browser to 80%, and you could see it fits in much more of the data. I'm just going to put this back to 100% to make this a little bit more legible. So make sure that you adjust the zoom to make this the size that best fits your screen. The second thing is there's now a give feedback button, which takes you to this Canny community forum. You could also create a post here, which we'll see and we could respond to, and other people could upvote. But you could also email us, and that's over here. So make sure that you know that that email us form is there to the extent that you need to get in touch with us. So the first thing to mention is we've changed the search functionality. The search functionality is now this much bigger pop-up. It also works a lot better, so you can search for things like Mexico CPI, and it will find that in a much more efficient way. This is also a good time to mention that we have global data now, so if you look for Tencent, you'll see Tencent stock here trading in Hong Kong or in China. You could also search for, let's say, like Samsung, which trades in Korea. So now we cover all global equities, including end-of-day prices, valuation, and all the fundamentals. The other thing to mention on the search is before you could just start typing on your keyboard to activate the search. Now you have to hit this backslash. So if my mouse is here and I hit backslash on my keyboard, I can go back and type Apple G just like I did before. Or if I hit backslash, I could do Facebook EST to get the estimates. And don't forget, you could also do Apple : SPY, and that'll give me the relative performance or the relative ticker of Apple versus SPY. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as you're working with the search box. Next thing on the navigation over here, we've separated the navigation, made it a little bit more efficient. So now you have your today's markets, your top news over here, and then the movers tab or the movers functionality we've changed just a little bit. You now have pre-regular market and post-market in the movers tab. This is for US markets. And then you can also change the index, the ETF, or the watch list that you're looking at here. So I could change this to NASDAQ 100 and see the securities that pop up here. We also now have a new My Dashboard section here. I'll go over that at the end. So we made a bunch of changes to My Dashboards. The next section are your regular market dashboards. This is where you can go and look through and browse the market. So those stay pretty similar to what they were before. You have some options here in terms of downloading the dashboard to a CSV file. So that's going to create a CSV. You can now also save these dashboards to a watch list. So if I wanted to save all these securities, I could save that to a watch list pretty easily. And then the last thing is the columns. Very easy way to change the columns by hitting there. And so that's a more optimized version of market dashboards. The next thing I wanted to mention is the analytics, where we have lots of charts, market scatter, and economic calendar. Lots of charts is probably where we made the most changes out of these three functions. And now in lots of charts, let me just make this bigger to show you kind of to get the most real estate. In lots of charts now, you can select how many charts you want to display here. So for example, if I want 4 or 9 or 16 here, which will fill up my entire page. I could also select which one of my chart templates to display. So for example, if I wanted to select my G chart or my price and volume chart, I could select that and then just flip through my charts of NASDAQ 100 or an ETF of my choosing or my watch list. So really useful function. and a lot more chart settings in here. If you wanted to change any of these templates, you would go to your G chart or your G function, change and save the template there, and it would appear here. So you could flip through and use that in lots of charts. Let me just open up the navigation, back up. Next section to highlight is the security analysis section. Let me just pull up Apple in here instead of the relative ticker, so it's a little bit easier. In the security analysis section, we have a very similar structure. There's a couple of changes to highlight. So first is we've expanded the snapshots. We now have an overview snapshot and description snapshot. So the overview looks similar to how it did before. You have your high-level metrics here on the right-hand side. The other thing to keep in mind here is now you could choose which chart you want. So for example, I have my snapshot chart, or I could choose my price and volume chart, or I could choose another chart, and that would load up into here and remember for your next snapshot. So a little bit more interactive. We now have a description button here, or description snapshot. Gives you a description in a much bigger fashion. The old version had the description in a very squeezed and convoluted box, so we wanted to expand that out. We also give you a lot more information on the company now. We give you some trading data, some price data, some profile information, and all the related securities which trade for this company. So Apple has all these securities which trade on other exchanges, and now that we have global data, we're able to display, and you could click and graph on these to the extent that they're important to you. We now change the estimates tab slightly, so now we have 3 tabs: estimates, price target, and estimate trends, giving you slightly different information than before. So now we show you the consensus estimates over time versus the stock price. We have this handy table here with estimates and valuation, and we have some information here on the price targets and analyst estimates. Next, we have a price target snapshot focused solely on this information. It sort of zooms in on the information in the previous snapshot. And then the estimate trends, which is similar to what we had before, which is all these estimates over time and how they're trending over time. You could switch this to sales or EBITDA or EBIT. And we have the quarterly and the annual numbers broken out here, as well as the growth rates as well. So that's pretty useful. On the financial analysis tab, we now have much more data. So now you have 10 years worth of data here and a lot more items to think about. So if I select annual, I'll see 10 years worth of Apple data here. The other thing to highlight is that because we now have global equities, you can put a stock like Toyota Motors in here, and we would have the information not only in US dollars, but we have it in the company's local currency or in Japanese yen here. So again, you could put in any company in the world and look at the financial statements right here. And then the FA settings give you a little bit more, options than before. You have some precision settings here and some ways to display the data as well. The news section, let me just switch this to Apple because we don't have international news yet. The news and Twitter and filing section is the same. We actually show the filings broken up into 4 different categories now, so we expanded that. So on the graphs, there's a couple of things to keep in mind that we've improved. So the first thing is that the selections and the templates are now in this section together over here. Before, the settings were in another place. So if you wanted to select some templates, you could do that over here. But the selections for those templates are now over here. So giving you a little bit of a separation between selections and templates, but the idea remains the same to the extent that you have a unsaved template and you wanted to add a function in here. So for example, if I wanted to add EBITDA, I could now save that as a new template, and this would be my test template. And that template would be here, and it would be available for other stocks. So that template functionality is pretty similar to what we had before, but a slightly different user interface. The next thing to mention is we now have this table, which is great. So now you could actually look at the graph and the table at the same time, so you don't have to switch back and forth. Pretty easy there. And you could download the table to CSV or to Excel right here. So that downloads all the data pretty easily, and that's a very useful function. I'm just going to hide this table and go back to one of my other templates that I have from before. The last thing to mention is on the share functionality. So on your share functionality, it's a much more improved, much more intuitive template. So now you have your graph here. You could put in the title here. This is an Apple chart. And I would save that changes, and I would make that 26. And now you have this chart that you can download. You can right-click and copy this image and paste it somewhere. We also have Twitter integration as we did before, so I could tweet this chart. My account is not connected, but I can also, we just created StockTwits integration. So to the extent that you have a chart here and you're a StockTwits user, you can hit StockTwits. You can type something, whatever you want about this chart, and you can post it to StockTwits straight from Koyfin, which is very cool and very streamlined. The other thing to mention is this right side menu that we have now, which we call the right side navigation. So in here, this is how you open and close it. In here is basically where you can display three things. You can display your watch lists. You can display your the top news, and you could display the movers, the top movers. So here are my top movers for the NASDAQ 100. The really cool part about this is you can now control the screen from the right-hand sidebar. So for example, if I have my movers here, I could click on Moderna and that would load that up, or I could click on Zoom, or I can click on PDD, or I could click on Illumina, and that would load up whatever I have in here. This also works for the snapshot or the estimate. So for example, if I have my snapshot in here, I could then click on the different securities here and load that up. Same thing, similar concept for the watch list. So if I have a watch list here called semiconductors, which is my semiconductors watch list, I can now click through and load up whatever security I want in the main function by clicking on the watch list. So now that we covered the navigation, the data, wanted to show you how my dashboard works, which is probably one of the biggest things that we upgraded in this version. All right, so my dashboards is 100 times more powerful now, but it is different than before. So it does take a little bit of a transition and getting used to. And by the way, you did not lose any information from your last version of Koyfin. All that information is still here. It just looks a little bit different. So just to show you how it works, you have these sample dashboard, a sample dashboard and a sample portfolio here. But now these my dashboards are a widget system that's totally flexible. So for example, I could have a table here and I could add another table here. But your dashboards from before, from the old version of Koyfin, are now in here in this widget. So I have a table widget here, and I can select anything, all my watch lists here in this table widget, and these are all my dashboards from the old version of Koyfin, which were my dashboards, and now they're called watch lists. So for example, I could select my semiconductors watch list, and that would pull up here. And just to illustrate how that works a little bit more clearly, let me just create a new dashboard, and that's going to create a new dashboard here. I'm just going to call that dashboard 3, and I'm just going to create a blank dashboard instead of selecting one of these pre-populated configurations. And so my dashboard 3, which I just created here, is totally blank. And I would add a component here. I'm going to add a watch list table here. So now this is going to be a watch list table. I could select an existing watch list. So again, this is going to be from my old version of Koyfin. And so if I wanted to select, let's say, my longs, and these are just long stocks that I was watching, I could do that here. And now they are selected here. If you want to add a ticker, it's at the bottom. So I could add Zoom, for example, and that would add it to a watch list. I could also import a list of tickers. So for example, if I hit add ticker and I go to import securities, I could then paste a bunch of tickers into here. Let me just show you how that works. I have a file here, an Excel file of the ARK FinTech ETF. I'm just going to copy these tickers in here. I'm just going to copy all of them. I'm going to copy paste it. I'm going to go back to Koyfin. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to hit import tickers. And now what Koyfin did is it basically matched all these results. And I would kind of go here, and for some reason it didn't find it. I'm not sure what this ticker is. But I would sort of go here and then make sure that all these are correct. And you could see these, like 9923 is a Hong Kong stock. And we matched it here. If that's not the exact match, you could click here and see if there's any other options that you think are a better match. I would hit add tickers, and that would populate into my ticker list, and now I have this ticker list. So I have this ticker list. Obviously, I want to look at some columns. I just don't want to look at a blank ticker list. So we have a concept in the new version of Koyfin called templates, and templates are cousins of what we previously called views. So here, if you click on templates, you will have the views that you had in the previous version of Koyfin. But let me just explain how it's different. And the biggest difference is there's no autosave functionality for templates. So a template is just like a traditional template you would use in another program. So for example, here I would load a template, and let's say my template that I would load is valuation, and it would just ask me, hey, do I want to override the current configuration I have? And I say yes, I want to override it, and here it loads my template. So now this is, I'm just going to remove this column because it's loading. Now this is my standalone template, and if I wanted to change the columns here, I would hit columns, and let's say I wanted to add some other EV to sales measures, and I wanted to add below 52-week high and above 52-week low, and I wanted to add the industry and the last price. And now I have all these columns selected. I would exit from there. So notice now I have all these new columns that I added, but that doesn't mean that I changed the template. This is just for this widget. And so if I wanted this new configuration to be saved as a template, I would actually go in here, and I would have to override the template that I had loaded before, which is valuation. I would have to hit save, and it would basically override the valuation template with this configuration. Or I could save it as a new template. Let's say I wanted to call this valuation 3, and now this is a template called valuation 3 that I can then use in another widget. But these columns and these templates are a little bit different, or a little bit separated now. So make sure you understand how that works. So another thing to point out here is the way that these rows are sorted. So one of the issues we had in the old version of Koyfin is users constantly wanted to manually sort these, which we now allow you to do. So you can now manually sort this however you want. So if I wanted Z-scaler up here, I can put that up here. If I wanted market access to be a little bit higher, then market access could be a little bit higher. If I wanted to sort by something, I would just right-click on the column heading, and I would do sort descending, and it would sort by descending, and that's probably a lot of numbers aren't here, but let's say I wanted to sort descending here. All the numbers are then here. If I wanted to go back to my manual sorting, I would click clear sorting and would go back to my manual sorting, which is pretty important. So now that we covered the sorting, I wanted to tell you about some grouping features that we have now. So right now, there are no groups, and in the old version of Koyfin, we didn't have groups. But this is something that we introduced. So for example, if I wanted to have a group called Group 1, I could put that here. And so now I have Group 1. And let's say I wanted to have another group called Group 2. I could put that here, and now I have Group 2. And then I could actually select different securities and send them to Group 1 or Group 2. And so now these are in Group 1. And let's say I wanted to select these and send these to, or I could actually right-click here, move to Group 2, and now they would go to Group 2. The benefit of grouping stuff is when you sort by, let's say if I wanted to sort by this, this is now sorted within a group, so that's pretty cool. So these sortings happen within a group. And then the other good thing about this is if I added a summary row, and summary rows are kind of these statistics at the bottom of the worksheet of the table. So let's say I wanted to add the average, and I would add average. Then out of here, for each of these groups, I would now have an average for all these things. So for my PE, the average of the unclassified is 59.5. The average of group 1 is 99.7, pretty expensive. And the average of group 2 is 101.3, even more expensive. And then the overall average is this number here, 86.8. So these groups are a very useful thing to be able to create segments. The other thing that you can group by are these predefined groups that we have. So right now it's my custom groups. But let's say I wanted to group by sector. I could do that as well. So now these are grouped by sector. So communication services, consumer discretionary, whatever it is. And I do have the average at the bottom of each group, which is super helpful. Let's say to the extent that you don't want an average or something for one of the columns. For example, for last price doesn't make sense. I would right click here, I would click hide, and now this average disappears, and that's a really useful function. And the other thing that I wanted to show you is on this columns. I mentioned the columns before, but let me just get into the details of these columns. So this column selection for this workbook is very similar to kind of what we had before, with a couple of big differences. So one is we have this section called Created by Me, which are columns that you can create, so they're custom columns. So one custom column that you have automatically is called My Notes. So let me add that in here, and I'll show you how that works in a second. But then you could also add other columns. So for example, if I wanted to add a number column, which is like a price target or maybe a potential number of shares I want to buy, I could create that column, or a date column, or a label column if I wanted to do buy, sell, and holds, or a single line of text. So let me show you how that works. I'm just going to create this column called color labels, and I'm going to add it here. And now I have these columns. So my notes now, for any of these stocks, I could click in here, and then I could write this. This is a note. Obviously, this is not a great note, but I would save that here, and to the extent I want to come back, then I would have something written down. So you could put whatever you want in here, whether it's pictures or news articles or some thoughts that you have on here, which is really important. These color labels are very cool. So to the extent that you have a label here, I could, for example, say buy, and then I could say sell. And then in here I would do buy, and then hold, and then maybe, and then I could color these in. So for example, if I wanted buy to be green, I would make that green, and now all the buys are green. And let's say all the cells I want to be red, I would make them red. So you get the idea of this. So this color label, and then in here, let's say I didn't want to call this color label, I would actually want to call this my rating. So now this is my rating, and now I have this for this column to fill out. And if I go back to columns and I go Created by Me, then I have the color label here that I could use for something in the future. And so here, let me give this a name, my rating. Great. And now this is my rating, my notes, and I could use that in the future for different things. The next thing to mention are portfolio tools. So we basically give you a way to create a pretty basic portfolio. Keep in mind that this is just our first version of portfolio tools. We are going to have more portfolio functionality going forward, including the ability to do model portfolios and the ability to look at portfolio statistics historically. But right now, this is a very basic kind of portfolio analytics suite. But in here, you have all these kind of portfolio metrics. You'll notice this keyboard here. This is where you input the field. So this is something where you input, and all the other stuff we calculate for you. So for example, if you want to see the weight in your portfolio, of certain securities, you would have to input the quantity, the number of shares, and that would give you that we would calculate the weight for you. So these are really cool portfolio fields. And if you want to see an example of a portfolio, we have one here for you called sample portfolio. So please feel free to click on that and see how that works. The other column selections are very similar to what we had before. I'd say the only big difference, the one really thing to mention, is we have a lot more mutual fund fields. So we have these mutual fund fields, and you could choose whatever you want for your mutual fund fields, and a lot of good high quality data that we've included and added for you to really use. The next thing to measure is, because we have so many international securities on the dashboard here, you can choose the currency that you want to display in, so dollar or all the other major currencies. And then the other thing to mention is you can download this dashboard to CSV now. So to the extent you hit that and you wanted to download to CSV, we do allow you to download all this data into CSV. And then just to kind of like round out the functionality of the dashboard, if I wanted this to be my table widget, and let's say I wanted to have another table widget, and I would add it here, and instead of my longs, it would be my, let's see, where are my shorts? There they are. These are my shorts, and my template, I would use, let's say, my performance template. Yes, load that in. And then in here, I would want to create, let's say, two graphs. So one graph is a regular graph, and the way that you populate this graph is you would just drag something into here. So now I have square, and so let's make that one graph. And then a second graph, I would put a performance graph here. And remember, performance graph is normalized to 100. And so in here, I might be able to, I have floor, and it's up 0.92% over the past year. The difference between the old version and this version is, this version you will have to drag stuff in here. So for example, if you wanted to populate something, you'd have to drag it in. On the normalized graph, there's this concept of add and replace. If I have add checked off, anything that I drag in here is going to be addition to what's already loaded. So, oops, I already have floor. So let's say I have this stock and this stock, and then I could actually add a couple together. So let's say these stocks, and it would add these to the existing securities. But if I wanted to replace, I would click that, and to the extent that I drag something in, it replaces the securities in there. So that's pretty important to note. But that's how you control the graphs in the widget. So I hope that gave you a really good overview of the new upgrade and the new system that we have. If you have any feedback, please click over here. You could either fill out this general feedback form and just tell us anything bad, good, ugly, concerns you have, any bugs you find, or you can email us this email form here, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Always love hearing from our users. So made a lot of big changes. I hope you find them useful to really tracking the market, and I hope this helps you to be a better investor. Thank you.